So, hello, Leah. How are you going?
I'm good, thanks, Eva. How are you?
Yeah, I'm very, very well. I'll just do a quick visual description. I'm a white woman with freckles on her face, and I'm wearing a black sleeveless top. And my background is a Japanese style screen with black framing and white paper inserts. So, thank you. Okay, Leah, you go for it.
Okay, I am a white middle-aged larger woman. You can see my head and shoulders, I think, on screen, and the black top of the outfit I'm wearing. You can also see in the background, but I am in a very old house with really high ceilings, and I think you might be able to see the very fancy chandelier in my study. So that's me.
Wow, fantastic. Okay, Leah, we're here today to talk about Lesley Hall, the amazing, timeless, famous Lesley Hall, who some people might not actually know much about these days because it has been 8 years since she passed away. And so there's obviously a new generation of people coming up. The reason for these videos is so that we can introduce who Lesley was, and supply reasoning behind the motivations for the scholarship that Arts Access offers. Okie dokie. First question: what were Lesley's motivations? Why did she do what she did? And when I'm talking about this, I'm talking about the actions she took, her involvement in governance, and starting the organizations that she did. And you, as a personal friend of hers, has quite an insight into this. Would you like to speak about that?
Yeah, sure. When I first met Lesley, I didn't know anything about her. She and I met through the Australian Federation of Disability Organisations, AFDO, where she was my boss. And I'd not heard of her before. She was new in the role, and I was coming into the organisation new as a policy person. Didn't have any sense of her. And over time, I learned a bit about her background. I would say Lesley approached everything that she did from the basis of being as inclusive as possible. I saw Lesley really reach out to self-advocates in her work. I saw her really speak from a feminist point of view about the things that she did and the work that she undertook. And I saw her try and reach out. You know, there's in the disability community, there's a whole lot of disagreements and kind of, oh, I don't agree with that. Politics, yeah, that's a good word for it. So I align myself with this person because they do things like I do, and clearly other people don't. Lesley was very clear that people with disabilities should have the right to come from whatever place they stood in, and she really supported that across all of the work that she did. She did a lot of things in the background that she didn't talk about, and I think I probably don't know all that she did. I think in some ways that's a mark of someone who's put their time and energy into a lot of things that matter to them. But I do know that she, when you have a disability, your energy is precious in different ways for all of us, but it is very precious. Mm-hmm. She put all of it to sometimes very day-to-day, mundane kind of governance things that helped people with disabilities advance a policy cause, sometimes really radical things like supporting, artists doing things that might have been considered on the fringes. But she put all of her energy towards raising the voice of people with disability.
It's beautiful. And what a beautiful segue you just gave me then, because my next question is, Lesley was passionate about supporting artists. Why do you think she was so passionate about this in particular?
I think for Lesley, what I saw of her was that arts were such an integral part of her own life. It was almost like kind of breathing. When you work with someone as a colleague, you get to know a bit about them personally, but you expect some of those personal things to just stay in a personal kind of sphere. But Lesley, she would take me and other AFDO employees to arts things. to a festival at Gasworks, or to Quippings. It's not usual to sit with your boss and watch somebody, do a performance piece half naked. And if
she did that.
Yeah,
wow.
She didn't do that, but she took me along to that.
Okay, I was wondering. I was imagining.
Yeah, no.
There's a whole side of Lesley I didn't know.
No, but she took us along to Quippings. She took us along to a range of things, and her gifts when she went traveling for work or other things would always be art. So art was in many ways, even though she did advocacy across such a broad range of things, art was her heart, I think. And it was the prism through which she viewed a lot of the rights and advocacy issues that people with disabilities face.
Yeah, big time. I've heard a saying, I don't know who said it or when they said it, but change begins in the arts. Do you believe that this was part of her motivation for the arts?
I think so. I think that, change in policy spaces, change in governments, change in society isn't always an accessible route for people with disabilities to try and pursue. Those things require a set of skills that sometimes through disadvantage or sometimes just through inclination, not everybody has, but we all have a desire to express ourselves. And I think Lesley saw that and understood it, and understood the power that it can have in social change.
Oh yeah, and my thoughts go back immediately to her 1982 infiltration of the Miss Australia contest, and if that wasn't showmanship, I don't know what is.
No, I agree. I think that's very right. It's very strategic showmanship.
Yeah, fantastic. Okay, I'll go to the last question, which is, what do you think would be her message to artists today?
I think Lesley was always so supportive of people sharing their genuine voice, that her message would be, just go out there and do it. It'd be something like that. It'd be really blunt. It'd be quite direct. But Lesley also had a passion for a whole lot of intersectional communities. Lesley was doing intersectionality before it was kind of a word even, and particularly she was a feminist. We just talked about her Miss Australia infiltration, and she really wanted women to step forward and to be able to speak up. I remember very clearly at one point, something had happened in the sector, I think it might have been internationally, and she just looked at me and said, sometimes women just are so afraid to step up and take power. And so I think she would have a particular message for women in the arts to own their own power and to stand in it.
Well, I kind of think it's a bit interesting that every winner of the Lesley Hall Arts and Disability Scholarship has been a woman thus far. We're not saying that it's set in stone or anything. In fact, I've actually said that I kind of hope a man wins it this year. But
a man or a non-binary person.
Yes,
or somebody
absolutely.
Gender fluid.
Yes, absolutely. Because I think, thinking back to that change begins in the arts, with the increased awareness of women's rights and women's issues lately, I think the voices of women have been magnified, perhaps more so than men in our sphere. And I wonder what Lesley's thoughts would be around the change now, because things have changed even in the past 8 years. Don't you agree?
Yeah. I was just thinking too about, as I said, non-binary and gender fluid and people who might identify in other ways. I was thinking, how would Lesley have used that language? It wasn't even language that was really commonly understood when Lesley passed away, but she would have embraced hearing from everybody, and she would have embraced the inclusivity of new language around gender. And she would have, I think, probably I hope I'm not just channeling myself here, but I think she would have respected the right for men to be able to put forward, that feminism works only when we are also hearing stories about the masculine experience, and particularly how toxic masculinity has affected men. But she would have, I think, still talked about how it is important that we hear from women right now, because we have not heard from them for so long, and men have dominated that space. This is a tipping point that has to happen.
Absolutely. Great. Well, thank you, Leah. I think I'm going to stop the interview at this point. So, I mean, the interview. So just a moment. Yeah, the recording. Hang on a second.
No worries.
All right.